Where has all the money gone? People ask this when thousands of tenants in China are kicked out after making their rental payments in advance. 7 pro-democracy Hong Kong lawmakers were arrested. It's due to a scuffle months ago when pro-democracy and pro-Beijing lawmakers clashed in the Legislative Council. An earthquake hit Turkey and Taiwan offered help. Turkey showed gratitude to Taiwan, causing China to pile on the pressure. The Chinese Communist Party has achieved far-reaching influence in U.S. politics, including this election. This, according to the top White House trade advisor. And an exclusive interview with a German businessman. Chinese police stole $1 million from him, and he did 7 years of forced labor in a Chinese prison. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. It seems an apartment rental platform in China has skipped town. Property owners say they never got their payments. Tenants say they're getting kicked out, even though they paid a full year's rent, and the platform's employees haven't been paid for months. It begs the question, where did all the money go?
Chungcheng is a rental platform with over 60,000 apartments in over 100 cities in China. Since October, scandals have been exposed in many places, saying the company ran away with rental money. For example, in Chengdu, the capital city of southwestern China's Sichuan province, the rental platform has withheld rental payments to thousands of property owners. Since they didn't get their money, some landlords chose to kick the tenants out. One tenant, Mr. Zhou, told us that the conflict between property owners and tenants has been tense. People who've been evicted can't get their money back, and nobody from the rental platform is doing anything.
Many have a one-year contract. Some of them just moved in for 1 month, and now this happened. The landlords just changed their locks and cut the water and electric supply. Some threatened their tenants. There were so many quarrels and fights.
The company completely disappeared. Mr. Zhao said he had already filed police reports. Then lawyers told them they should file lawsuits against the property owners.
The police asked us to negotiate with the landlords by ourselves. I asked some lawyers, and they said that's the only thing we can do, to negotiate with the landlords. We could bear our own losses, or we could file lawsuits.
Another tenant from Xi'an City, Mr. Liu, told us over 300 landlords and tenants gathered at the rental platform's headquarters to defend their rights. A man in charge took them to the local precinct, and right there, over 50 policemen chased them down and beat them.
They beat men and women alike. A young girl was beaten to the ground. A man was dragged away by riot police after they beat him. Another 3 were also taken away.
According to Mr. Liu, the boss behind the beatings is an official, a deputy to the city's People's Congress. He is also the board chair of Sensai Group, which owns the rental platform. By the end of October, the group appointed somebody else and the chair got away. Another tenant, Wan Liang from Xi'an City, says there are many victims. They're all facing homelessness even after paying a one-time rental fee for about $4,000. He himself paid $3,500 in June. He says the landlord is trying everything to kick him out because the rental platform didn't pass on his payment.
Now 3 parties are all defending their rights, not only the tenants and property owners, but the employees of Chungcheng platform also. They haven't been paid for months already.
Chungcheng is not alone. In the past few years, many other rental platforms in China have been involved in similar scandals. One thing in common is that they failed to send the monthly payments to property owners, even though tenants paid their fees on time. The big question remains, where did all that money go? Reporting by Xu Wenwei, NTD News.
Official financial reports released at the end of October showed in the first 3 quarters, China's 6 state-owned banks have increased their operating income by about 3%. Their profits reduced by about 9% compared to the same period of last year. Their total debts had increased by about 9% compared to the end of the previous year. About 100 Chinese banks that aren't listed in China's stock markets have also released their financial reports at the end of October. According to China-based Securities Daily, 3/4 of these banks are making a loss. 1/3 of the banks have seen their profits drop by more than 10% year on year. According to Chinese media, in the first half of this year, at least 1,300 bank outlets and branches in China were closed. State-owned banks laid off a total of 26,000 employees. Now we take a look at Hong Kong. 7 prominent opposition Hong Kong lawmakers, both current and former, were arrested on Sunday. Hong Kong's pro-democracy camp criticized the move. It was in connection with a May 8th scuffle when pro-democracy and pro-Beijing lawmakers clashed in the Legislative Council. 4 of the arrested are current lawmakers. The pro-democracy camp said they strongly condemned the totalitarian and indiscriminate arrests. They also demanded their immediate and unconditional release. The 7 are due to appear in court on November 5th. According to the order, if found guilty, they could face up to 12 months in prison. Now we turn to Taiwan. Taiwan offered help to Turkey due to a massive earthquake last Friday. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan thanked all countries that offered help and put their flags on Twitter. Among them was the Taiwanese flag. But according to Taiwan's foreign minister Joseph Wu, Erdogan then removed the Taiwan flag from the thank you tweet, supposedly due to China's meddling and pressure. Wu condemned China's behavior over a matter of humanitarian assistance, saying it has no political implications. He added Taiwan will continue to provide humanitarian assistance to others that need help, such as the Philippines and Vietnam after recent devastating typhoons. Last Friday, Turkey and the Greek island of Samos were hit by a magnitude 7.0 quake that killed at least 64 people. And now we'll hear from White House trade advisor Peter Navarro. He spoke with American Thought Leaders host Jan Jekielek about the Chinese Communist Party's influence in American politics and culture and how it could affect the upcoming election.
For the Chinese Communist Party,
Navarro asserted that the Chinese Communist Party has achieved far-reaching influence in U.S. politics, and that's of particular concern this election.
There's an unholy alliance right now between the Democrat Party and the Chinese Communist Party to defeat Donald J. Trump on Election Day.
He said many in America, including Hollywood, the media, and even NBA players, are advancing communist goals without understanding the implications. He added that NBA stars promote sneakers made in sweatshops in China and turn a blind eye to human rights abuses like concentration camps in Xinjiang, the live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners, and brutality in Hong Kong. This behavior can push a narrative that China's regime and socialist system is superior to ours. This, Navarro says, is harmful. He says BLM and Antifa destabilize cities by rioting and looting, something the CCP welcomes.
The world's watching. The world is watching, and the Chinese Communist Party is just loving every minute of it, because what they do is say, see, democracy leads to chaos, our authoritarian system leads to stability.
Navarro said Trump's second term would continue to show toughness against China. On the other hand, Navarro says Biden has a 47-year record of going soft on China. He says allegations of his family's ties to Chinese businesses show Biden has likely been compromised by the CCP. He also said the virus came from the CCP, and the Democratic Party doesn't want to blame China for any of that, because that means the public won't blame Trump.
And I think in a second term, you can certainly expect that the arc of toughness on China will continue. My one regret this campaign is that we were unable to punch through the mainstream media to raise awareness among the American people that this virus did indeed come from the Chinese Communist Party and they're killing Americans.
Christina Kim, NTD News.
Now we turn to U.S.-China relations. China's foreign ministry spokesperson lashed out at the U.S. on Twitter over the weekend. She accused the U.S. of being the real Thanos, saying there is no need to disguise itself as a victim. Thanos is a Marvel supervillain. He collects infinity stones to get the power to eliminate half the world's population. The spokeswoman's tweets are in response to a U.S. official's recent remarks on China. In an online seminar, Assistant Secretary of State David Stilwell said Beijing's influence activities are predatory and hegemonic.
The CCP wants control, and at least it wants a veto in public discourse and political decisions globally, world over.
Stilwell said the Chinese regime is highly capable and hostile to principles like democracy and openness. He added the United States should demand reciprocity from China. He said America should limit Beijing's access to America's open society, including trade, education, investment, and technology. Stilwell also urged other countries to follow America's lead, such as rolling out bills to counter Beijing's influence activities. China is threatening the U.S. with retaliatory measures, and this time it's over journalist visas. On Monday, China's foreign ministry accused the U.S. of giving Chinese journalists visas that are soon set to expire. This May, the Trump administration reduced Chinese journalists' visa to 90 days with an option to extend. That followed China expelling American journalists from several mainstream media from the country. Spokesperson Wang said some Chinese journalists were granted visa extension last week, but it's due to expire as soon as this Wednesday. And there are also journalists that haven't got their visas yet. Wang accused the U.S. of suppressing Chinese journalists and threatened potential reciprocal measures. Lawmakers from 7 European countries say Taiwan deserves a seat at the World Health Assembly meeting next week, also known as the WHA. Over 100 European lawmakers have sent letters to the head of the World Health Organization, or WHO. They're urging Director General Tedros to invite Taiwan to this month's assembly. That's according to Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. 4 European lawmakers from Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic sent a joint letter to Tedros on October 22nd. In separate letters addressed to Tedros, more than 100 lawmakers from the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Slovakia also expressed their strong support. They pointed to Taiwan's success in containing the virus and that it's imperative that Taiwan joins the WHO. They added that excluding Taiwan and its 23 million citizens would be a human rights violation, and it wouldn't benefit the global effort to combat the virus. Taiwan is not a member of the WHO, but from 2009 to 2016, Taiwan's health ministers were allowed to take part in its international meetings as observers. But since 2017, Beijing has barred Taiwan from taking part in the assembly and its meetings. The Chinese regime considers Taiwan part of its territory, even though the island has its own democratic government. Despite being just 81 miles from China, Taiwan has largely prevented the spread of the virus on the island. Its last locally transmitted case was reported more than 200 days ago in April. And Japan may have shut off China from supplying drones to its government. That's according to a Reuters report citing governmental sources. The Japanese concerns are over the protection of sensitive information and to bolster national security. That's as the country's economy is deeply dependent on China. But it has ramped up efforts to cut ties since the pandemic, subsidizing manufacturers to leave China and go home. Japan's domestic drone makers expect to benefit from the changes. China has the world's largest maker of commercial drones. The Chinese company owns nearly 80% of the worldwide commercial sector. But cybersecurity researchers found that their product collects large amounts of personal information. Researchers say the Chinese regime could exploit the data since all Chinese companies have to cooperate with state intelligence agencies if asked. In his first interview with an English-language media outlet, a German citizen talks about his 7.5 years in a Chinese prison, where he experienced forced labor and torture. In the first part of our 3-part series, Robert Rother recounts what he called his rigged trial in crowded living conditions in prison. NTD's Germany correspondent Christian Watchen reports.
Robert Rother spent 7 years and 7 months in a Chinese prison. In 2004, he left Germany for China to pursue his dream job. At first, most of his business ideas flopped and he went broke. But later, with a new partner, he started over in Shenzhen, a megacity in South China. They began trading in diamonds, and soon business was booming.
My life was kind of exciting in China. I was together with the high society of Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and Macau. I drove 2 Ferraris. I bought my first Ferrari.
During the financial crisis of 2008, Rother and his partner struck gold. As China's capital market dried up, they helped Chinese businesses get access to cash by leveraging relationships they had built. He says at one point he made $800,000 from commissions alone. His latest venture was a website that sold Chinese stock market information in English. But amid his success, the Chinese regime wasn't a fan of his dealings.
I just thought to myself, why should I do that? I bought the license, I did everything what I did was legally, and so I did not quite understand the message from them. So later on in jail, I figured out through other inmates who got arrested for similar crimes like contract fraud or corruption that this is a common way to get rid of competition in China.
He first received a warning from a friend to stop the project. Later, Rother came to understand that in areas like finance, the Chinese Communist Party works hard to maintain its control, and since authorities had no leverage over him as a German citizen and without ties to the party, they had to get rid of him. One day in 2011, he was sitting inside a bar when police officers showed up, asking to speak with him. He first thought it was a misunderstanding that he could clear up, but eventually he realized in China things are handled differently.
At the beginning, I asked them, could I speak to a lawyer? I mean, it's kind of normal in our society or in our countries. So they told me, why do you need a lawyer if you haven't done anything wrong? So I was kind of, hey, yeah, okay.
Police originally told him he'd be brought to a detention center for 3 days. In the end, Rother spent over 3 years there. While in detention, he heard that his safe was emptied. It had held watches, diamonds, and $1 million in cash. His Ferrari was taken too. A fellow inmate and former police officer told him it's common for police to raid a suspect's apartment while they're detained. Rother described being interrogated for over 100 hours. During that time, police pressured him to confess. They also threatened him with the death penalty.
To put a lot of pressure on you, you know, if you're isolated from the world, you have no contact to anyone, you don't know what's happening with you. You don't know anything about your charges. My lawyer had no access to any files of the case because it's also not allowed according to Chinese law. You just don't know.
But Rother didn't give in. After 13 months, his case was transferred to a prosecutor. The verdict was handed down in December of 2013. He was convicted of running a pyramid scheme that defrauded rich Chinese businessmen of over $21 million. The statement asserted Rother pretended to be a descendant of the Rothschild family to get access to China's high society. During the trial, not a single witness was called. The verdict relied exclusively on testimony from police interrogation. Rother's lawyer also spoke most of the alleged victims, though none said they had been defrauded. Rother later compared the official testimony with notes he had made after each interrogation.
So it's basically a lie what they wrote in these statements. Simply, they write whatever they needed to have to convict you. I mean, you can only get justice if you have a fair trial. If you cannot get a fair trial, how can you get justice? It's impossible.
Chinese courts have a conviction rate of 99.9%. According to a former judge in Fujian province, China's judicial system is inherently unjust. That's because the Chinese Communist Party controls the courts and the police. Anyone the party dislikes is likely to be unfairly prosecuted. Rother was sentenced to 8 years. Walking out of the courtroom, he described smiling at Chinese state-run media reporters to demonstrate that he considered the trial a farce. His prison term began in July of 2014 at Dongguan Prison in southern China's Guangdong province. Dongguan Prison holds about 5,000 inmates. About 500 of them are foreigners. Rother says cells were crowded and lacked privacy.
And in each cell were 18 people, maximum of 18, and the size was around about 200 square feet. So on that 200 square feet we had 2 holes in the ground to do your business. You had a small washing basin to brush your teeth, to wash your dishes. In that cell you also were eating. Everything was in that cell.
Rother slept on a wooden plank without a sheet, mattress, or pillow, often shoulder to shoulder with another inmate. He explained that he shared a cell with corrupt officials, drug dealers, rapists, and murderers. He added that medical care and hygiene conditions were even below Chinese standards. In the summer, the stench of sweat and odors from the toilet holes filled the cell. He was forced to wake up at 5:30 a.m. every day. His waking hours were mainly filled with forced labor. Every night, the inmates also endured propaganda sessions. They were made to watch Chinese state TV and listen to lectures from police officers.
We were sitting on small chairs like this height, and have to sit like this and listen to the speech of the education of the police officers. They would tell us about Karl Marx, about communism, about our own behavior, how we have to reform ourselves.
According to Chinese law, labor and re-education are built into prison sentences. Its system is known as reform through labor. In China, more than 2.3 million people were incarcerated as of 2018. Reporting by Christian Watchin, NTD News, Berlin.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you leave, we have an announcement to make. Tomorrow, we will not have an episode of China in Focus, but tune in at 7 p.m. here on this channel as we bring you live coverage of Election Night 2020. See you then.
This November 3rd, one of the most hotly contested elections in U.S. history. An unprecedented White House race. Who will lead the nation?
Jobs and companies are coming back to our country like never before.
He will shut it down again. He will destroy this country.
It's time to stand up, take back our country.
The president has no plan.
Tune into NTD on November 3rd for live coverage and results.